Alright guys, welcome back to Formula 1 news, and with plenty of new regulations confirmed yesterday, chief among which, at least for the near future, the 2023 regulations. Mercedes seemingly quite happy with this, Red Bull certainly not, but they do say they will still be confident they can adapt to next season despite not liking the changes the FIA have made. Very much enjoyed your thoughts in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoy, subscribe if you are new as always, I'd greatly appreciate it. First of all, wanted to mention the new 2026 engines. This is what the engines currently look like, the MGU-H, which is going to be gone, and the MGU-K, which is going to be now part of the battery. So effectively, the power unit now, the actual combustion engine, is going to get a lot smaller. Instead of about 70, I think maybe 80% of the power coming from, even more than that, I think, coming from the ICEs it currently is, and about, I think it's like 850 horsepower currently comes from, as you can see here, there's about 1,000 horsepower engine, 160 currently comes from the hybrid pack, and then like 850, I think, comes from the ICE, the actual combustion engine. In 2026, half of it is going to come from the hybrid engine and half of it's going to come from the ICE. So there's only going to be about a 500 horsepower engine in the car. And when the hybrid power is not active, the car, you would think, would be somewhat slower. Now, like, not exactly sure how this is going to play out here in reality, but they have made quite a few changes here for the engines in a few years' time. This was the confirmation that came through from the FIA yesterday that all this stuff is now being confirmed. So the MGU-H is gone. That's the heat component of the motor generator unit, I'm pretty sure is what it stands for. The ERS power, which is recovered over the lap during braking and stuff, has now been doubled. So effectively, it's much more on the battery than it is on the regular combustion engine right now. It's going to 100% sustainable fuel rather than just 10% biofuel that we presently have. There's even a cost cap for the manufacturers, but it's still a 1.6 litre turbo V6. So some changes maybe not so significant to others. This was rather interesting though, because of course Porsche and Audi might want to get involved in engine manufacturing going forwards, and I think the existing manufacturers wanted the pistons to have to be made of steel because that's the kind of technology they have experience with, and apparently it provides, or it requires, special kind of technology and equipment to make steel pistons, whereas the aluminium pistons were the ones that the new manufacturers wanted, and the regulations are allowing both. So they're trying to lower the barrier to entry for new engine manufacturers to come through, which is probably what we will see. The expectation is that Porsche and Red Bull have a deal that's going to be announced in the near future from 2026 and beyond. So that's the update on the engine side. This is what it means. The horsepower of the engine should be the same, but the fact that the hybrid unit is now playing a much bigger role in the power means, well, it's certainly going to be interesting for what this means for the way these engines perform. Of course, look, it is quite a way out as of yet, but the combustion only producing 530 horsepower is, quite something, and maybe the top speed is going to be drastically reduced. Who knows? There's been people talking about the fact that they want to do more kind of active aero, such that, okay, maybe in like on regular performance, the engine actually has less power in a few years, but maybe we can have retractable wings or whatever on the straights, such that the performance is less kind of impacted, I suppose. That'd be kind of crazy. Of course, the regulations for the actual cars themselves, not just the engines, remain to be seen. We only have what they look like until 2023, which was also confirmed yesterday. This I thought was interesting from Brundle actually mentioning, because the previous few years people have said, look, we wish the cars had a bit more noise, back to the V10 days, right? And some of the previous eras where they sounded so good. The V6s nowadays, they're not quite as exciting to listen to as they were in the past. Brundle does say that maybe with no MGU-H and units in the turbo system, they'll generate more noise. And also, this is an interesting point that from 2024, another detail here, no tire blankets or heaters are allowed anymore. I think this is kind of like, firstly, an environmental thing. These heaters that they use to keep the tires warm consume an awful lot of energy. And also, I guess the idea is maybe like a more evenly spread across teams, so that, like, okay, tire blankets are just not allowed anymore. And also, in theory, it increases the driver's skill, because I mean, we saw Max Verstappen, for example, at the Hungarian Grand Prix on his outlaps, did some crazy good outlaps on those brand new kind of cold tires that other drivers were not able to achieve. Now, you take off the heaters and it means that on an outlap, like, it really does differentiate the driver's skill with tires that are colder, that, which drivers can deal with that better than others effectively. But it does also mean that the undercut may be less powerful, as an outlap is going to be effectively worse. Maybe the overcut becomes more viable from 2024. It's going to change the dynamics a bit. But another update I thought I would mention for you guys right there. These are the technical regulation changes coming in for next season. We looked at this briefly yesterday, the 15mm floor edge raise. That's kind of the key one. Some changes to the diffuser and a sensor as well. The idea here is they believe safety is at risk for the drivers with the porpoising phenomenon. They want to reduce it, and they're going to mandate some changes to the the aerodynamics to prevent that happening in future, theoretically. They said that, like, yes, the last few races, porpoising has been less of an issue, but they still do believe it shall be a problem. Now, this is the thing. Toto Wolff has said that they should make some changes. He's effectively been pushing pretty hard for the FIA to make changes just like this. Red Bull and Ferrari have opposed, and Wolff was kind of saying, well, look, they're opposing because they don't want a third guest at the party. They want it, their way to be perfectly fine and going forwards, and that they don't want the team that's kind of struggled with this year's regulations catching up, right? Which, of course, is understandable, makes sense. That's just the way it's going to go when you're leading or chasing in the championship battle. But the FIA have decided what they have decided, and Red Bull obviously aren't going to be so happy about it, right? They would love, in an ideal world for them, for the regulations to stay exactly how they are. Next season, they can run a similar car with some further upgrades and development time, and they can keep their pecking order at the top of the grid. Now, look, things are going to change, and Christian Horner does say, look, we'll have to deal with it. We've been pretty good at finding a solution over the years, but it's certainly not what they wanted to see. This is what Horner said back at the Hungarian Grand Prix, where these changes were first kind of being rumoured. He says, look, a compromise needs to be found, but it's a bit of a tricky one because that regulation change is massive. The theoretical 25mm ride height suggestion that was made, it's actually going to be 15 now. It changes the whole concept of the aerodynamics, and it's tricky for the FIA because where do you draw the line? Well, there is a safety obligation of the FIA to look into. Where does that line stop? It's an interesting question, really. Like, do they start mandating when you have to go from slick tyres to wets or from wets to inters? Because, that's also a safety concern. So, look, you don't want the FIA to get involved with that, but maybe you do want to get them involved in aerodynamic issues that affect the performance of the cars. And this is Horner's reaction to these announcements then. So after the 15mm ride height has been confirmed just yesterday, 15mm is not as good as leaving it alone. He would prefer, of course, for things to stay as they are, and isn't happy with this change at all. He would, of course, like things to stay as they are with no mandated ride height, but he does say, look, it's better than the 25mm initially suggested, but still 15mm is not great for Red Bull, as they say. Look, it's a compromise we are going to have to incorporate, but as he mentioned earlier, stuff like this does entirely change the aerodynamic concept, because if, okay, you raise the ride height of the floor, that means you can no longer generate quite the same downforce from the ground effect of the car. That means you might have to kind of change around the way the other aero parts of the car are designed, because it seems like where Red Bull have really had a great strength this year is that they have a really sleek car that has very little drag, and that's why they're able to reach such a high top speed, because they're generating so much of their downforce from the floor, which seems to be far more complicated and efficient than basically every other team, maybe with Ferrari being an exception, and maybe Mercedes are getting up there now. But it does seem like their floor, kind of the way the skirting works, right, where you trap a lot of the air in and can create a low pressure zone under the car to suck it to the ground. Red Bull might have been able to do that better than every other team so far, which is why they're able to run such little downforce on the wings and therefore be so streamlined in a straight line. If this does happen, it does change the concept where they might have to rely more on aero from the wings and from the car design outside of the flooring, which maybe hurts them more than other teams. That's certainly an implication. They do say, look, it's a compromise. We're going to have to learn to deal with it and incorporate it. We're going to have to find a solution, but obviously they're not happy with these changes. Now, some teams are happy with these changes. Interestingly enough, actually, Alpha Tauri, given their relationship, of course, with Red Bull, Franz Tost saying they've praised the measures the FIA have confirmed that will try and combat porpoising. So definitely certain teams and different drivers have different perspectives on whether they should or should not have done this. Alpha Tauri seem happy with it. Maybe they think that with their car design, this 15mm raise kind of helps them more than other teams. It is an interesting one because I think theoretically a lot of the top teams probably have a far more sophisticated floor design than some of the others, and maybe this change helps some of the lower tier teams to catch up to a certain extent, but at the same time, maybe now it's just a matter of, okay, how much can you maximize from a more challenging aerodynamic package, which probably the top teams are going to do the best job of. So it's an interesting one. I think that's been the implication here, that maybe these benefits or these changes actually help the better funded teams. There, of course, is always different schools of thought on this. The fact of the matter is, though, that, being better funded is generally always an advantage no matter what the situation. But yeah, definitely intrigued to your thoughts on all that one in the comment section below. And just to mention this as we close out, right, because it's not just next year's rules, it's also the changes that they've mandated for this season with the removal of the flexi floors. Mercedes actually have the most weekends so far this season being in the points. Every single weekend they've had at least one driver in the points. It's happened for the majority of other teams apart from the double DNF for Red Bull back in Bahrain and for Ferrari in Baku, and pretty much for the other teams you see similar numbers. But yeah, Williams only twice. Haas is interesting because they're looking kind of okay in the championship, but they've only scored points on 5 weekends. It's like when they do score points, they seem to score a decent amount of points. But yeah, we'll see how the championship progresses, of course. course, but Mercedes are sitting pretty to at least potentially challenge for P2 in this year's Constructors, and then next year they'll probably be quite happy about these changes because it's pretty much what they wanted, and Red Bull clearly aren't so happy about it. But very much intrigued to your thoughts in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new as always, take care of yourselves, and I'll see you next time.